Overall Introduction. F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby is a luminous portrait of the Roaring Twenties, conveyed through the reflective eyes of narrator Nick Carraway. The novel follows Nick's arrival in West Egg, Long Island, where he becomes entangled in the glittering yet turbulent world of high society, most notably through his mysterious neighbor, Jay Gatsby. Themes of unrequited love, ambition, class divides, and the haunting allure of the past come alive in Fitzgerald's evocative prose. Here is a chapter-by-chapter abridged version, narrated in the same first-person style and attempting to capture as much of Fitzgerald's spirit and detail as possible. Chapter 1. Nick comes to West Egg.
In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father offered me a piece of advice that stayed lodged in my mind. Try to remember that not everyone has had the advantages you've had. This shaped my habit of reserving judgment about people, making them eager, sometimes too eager, to share their confidences with me. After I returned from the Great War, restless and longing for something beyond the Midwest, I moved east to learn the bond business. Through a stroke of luck and timing, I rented a small house in a strangely captivating place called West Egg on Long Island. West Egg, where I settled, was considered the less fashionable counterpart to East Egg, despite both protruding like massive twin eggs into the Sound. My little place, though modest, was flanked by giant estates. One such mansion, a grand, almost fantastical structure, belonged to a man named Gatsby. At that time, I knew nothing of him but his name. My cousin, Daisy, and her husband, Tom Buchanan, lived directly across the bay in East Egg. One evening I drove over to have dinner with them. Their home was a red and white Georgian colonial mansion that gave off an air of affluence and old money. Tom, an old college acquaintance, had changed little since his football days. He remained physically imposing, marked by a certain arrogance. Daisy, on the other hand, radiated warmth through her thrilling voice, but it was tinged with a sadness I couldn't entirely place. There, I also met Jordan Baker, an elegant golfer who possessed a cool self-possession and an aloof manner. Dinner proved tense, for a telephone call, clearly from Tom's mistress, interrupted the meal. Though neither Daisy nor Tom openly acknowledged the awkwardness, an undercurrent of tension hovered in the air like a storm on the horizon. I sensed Daisy was deeply unhappy, but I couldn't quite unravel why. When night fell, I returned to West Egg. Alone at home, I noticed a figure standing at the edge of the water near the great mansion next door, stretching his arms toward a distant green light across the bay. Even from afar, I detected a yearning intensity. Before I could call out or introduce myself, he vanished into the dark, leaving me alone with the hum of night and the sense that something extraordinary lay just out of reach.
Chapter 2. The Valley of Ashes in Tom's Double Life.
Nestled between the wealthy enclaves of West Egg and New York City, an ashen wasteland sprawled in a desolate stretch, the Valley of Ashes. Here, everything was cloaked in gray dust, watched over by a looming billboard featuring the fading eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. One sweltering afternoon, Tom insisted I travel with him into the city. We rode the train, but we left it prematurely at a dingy stop in the heart of the ash heaps. Tom wanted to pick up his mistress, Myrtle Wilson, who was the wife of George Wilson, a forlorn, spiritless garage owner. Inside George's shabby garage, Tom's domineering personality took center stage. He casually promised to sell George a car, but spoke to him as though he was barely present. Myrtle herself, coarse yet brimming with a certain vitality, joined Tom without the faintest hesitation, leaving her husband behind in a cloud of ashy hopelessness. I was startled to see how dismissive and bold they both were, and I could only follow along when Tom swept me toward Manhattan. We ended up at an apartment Tom rented for such affairs. There, Myrtle underwent a transformation. With a change of dress, She behaved like an entitled socialite, ordering supplies for the place and chattering about spending money on a dog, perfumes, magazines, things she believed matched Tom's world. Soon, Myrtle's sister Catherine and a couple named the McKees joined us, and whiskey flowed freely. What began as a seemingly light-hearted afternoon spiraled into a raucous gathering with superficial gossip about Gatsby, the rumor that he might be a nephew of Kaiser Wilhelm, and other far-fetched tales of wealth. Yet, underlying the forced gaiety was tension. Myrtle grew increasingly drunk and outspoken, taunting Tom about his wife, Daisy. The final straw came when she repeated Daisy's name over and over, ignoring Tom's stern commands to stop. Abruptly, Tom broke Myrtle's nose with a single swift motion, unleashing a torrent of blood and horrified cries. The party disintegrated into chaos. Stunned by Tom's violent outburst, I fled, deeply unsettled by the brutality and the ease with which everyone seemed prepared to accept it. By the time I waited for the late-night train home, the entire affair made me question what sorts of lives these affluent or would-be affluent people led behind the smoke and glamour of their parties.
Chapter 3. Gatsby's Lavish World.
Back in West Egg, my mysterious neighbor Gatsby hosted the most lavish parties imaginable. Each weekend, people swarmed his mansion under blazing lights and cascading orchestras as if drawn by an irresistible magnet. Exotic drinks, towering buffet tables, and dancing under swirling colored lanterns transformed his gardens into a nighttime carnival. I noticed, however, that many guests arrived uninvited, and that few of them ever laid eyes on the host himself. One Saturday, a formal note arrived by way of a chauffeur in a pale blue uniform, inviting me to one of Gatsby's little parties. Excited, yet unsure of what to expect, I donned my white flannels and headed over. Inside, I discovered a swirl of strangers engaged in gossip, speculation, and curious whispers about Gatsby. Some insisted he was a spy. Others claimed he had killed a man or was an Oxford graduate with royal connections. Despite living next door, I initially couldn't locate him among the revelers. Then I spotted Jordan Baker, the golfer I had met at Daisy's dinner. Relieved to see a familiar face, I joined her. We wandered around, drinking in the music and the chatter, until an unassuming man casually mentioned to me that we had served in the same division during the war. Moments later, he smiled in a way that made me feel instantly understood. It was then I realized this was Jay Gatsby. His charm and politeness distinguished him from the boisterous mob. There was a curious, formal reserve in his manner. He seemed genuinely pleased to meet me, yet he left me with the faint impression that he was always orchestrating something behind the scenes. Later in the evening, Gatsby pulled Jordan aside for a private conversation that I would not learn about until afterward. Meanwhile, curiosity about him intensified. The party soared onward under glowing lanterns and moonlight, but I sensed that Gatsby was preoccupied by something, or someone, beyond the extravagance. He watched the festivities from a slight remove, as though he were forever measuring the success of his grand design. At the end of the night, I felt both dazzled and mystified. It became clear that beneath the champagne, sparkle lay deeper motivations. Gatsby's sumptuous parties weren't just for entertainment. They were part of a larger dream, one I could only guess at.
Chapter 4. Revelations and Arrangements.
Not long after that first invitation, I saw more of Gatsby. One morning, he drove me to New York in his gorgeous yellow roadster, casually pointing out evidence of his apparent wealth. A car so elaborate, it drew stares wherever we went. On the way, he recounted what he called his life story. Being the son of wealthy, now deceased parents in the Midwest, studying at Oxford, collecting war honors. Yet his polished words felt too neat, as though he were trying very hard to appear a certain way. Before I could decide what to believe, he introduced me to Meyer Wolfsheim, a business associate rumored to have ties to the underworld. The meeting made me suspect Gatsby's money might not come from entirely above-board sources, though Gatsby stayed vague on the specifics. Later that day, Jordan Baker told me the real key to Gatsby's extravagant world: Daisy. Before the war, Daisy and Gatsby had been deeply in love when he was a young officer stationed near her Louisville home. But Daisy came from old money, and Gatsby was then penniless, an impossible obstacle. When he was shipped overseas, Daisy eventually married Tom Buchanan, complete with a lavish wedding and abundant fanfare. According to Jordan, Gatsby, still desperately in love with Daisy, had purchased his West Egg mansion directly across the bay from the Buchanan's estate so he could be close to her. Those fabulous parties? He had hoped Daisy might simply wander in one evening, lured by the music and lights. Since that chance hadn't come, he now had a new plan. He wanted me to invite Daisy over to my little West Egg cottage for tea, where Gatsby could accidentally reunite with her. Everything about this made me simultaneously touched by his devotion and uneasy about its consequences. Daisy was married. Tom was powerful and arrogant, but Gatsby's longing seemed boundless. I agreed to help, out of compassion, curiosity, and perhaps the faint thrill of witnessing a romantic gamble of staggering proportions.
Chapter 5. Tea with Daisy and the Green Light.
I arranged the meeting on a rainy day. Gatsby, abnormally nervous, arrived early, filling my cottage with flowers and anxiously insisting on perfecting every detail. When Daisy turned up, unaware of who awaited her, she seemed more curious than suspicious. The moment Gatsby appeared, a trembling awkwardness seized them both. All the polish and confidence he displayed at his parties dropped away. He was merely a man consumed by love, terrified that Daisy's feelings might have changed. Slowly, their initial discomfort gave way to soft laughter and genuine emotion. When the sun finally broke through, Gatsby proudly took us on a tour of his mansion. Daisy was awestruck. Room after room revealed a testament to Gatsby's colossal ambition and endless desire to impress her. Costly fabrics, meticulously curated decorations, and a wardrobe of beautiful shirts imported from England. At one point, Daisy buried her face in them and sobbed, overcome by emotion. Gatsby's dream, once intangible, now seemed almost within reach. In the middle of this heartfelt reunion, I remembered the solitary figure I'd seen on the lawn, stretching his arms toward the distant green light at the end of Daisy's dock. Now, with Daisy standing in his mansion, that light, so long an emblem of his hopes, seemed merely a green beacon in the fog. Watching Gatsby's radiant expression, I couldn't help wondering if any human being could measure up to the perfection he had envisioned for so many years.
Chapter 6. The Man Behind the Mansion.
As news spread of Gatsby's wealth, rumors swirled, and one enterprising reporter even attempted to interview him at his mansion gates. In the midst of all this, Gatsby's true origins began to surface. He had been born James Gatz in a poor North Dakota family. From boyhood, he cultivated elaborate daydreams of success, devouring self-improvement schedules and vowing to escape his humble beginnings. A chance encounter with a wealthy yachtsman inspired him to reinvent himself, Jay Gatsby. Meanwhile, his longing for Daisy only intensified now that she was within his orbit. He threw another grand party, which Daisy and Tom attended. Yet it didn't go smoothly. Tom's presence cast a pall, and Daisy found the raucous West Egg crowd vulgar and unfamiliar. Gatsby appeared distraught that she wasn't enjoying herself. He confided in me that night, fearful she would never fully renounce Tom and return to the exact innocence they had shared before the war. Gatsby believed in the power of the past to be recaptured completely. If only Daisy would say she never loved Tom. Yet I sensed a brittleness in that dream. He wanted Daisy's love to remain pure and unchanged, but time can alter even the deepest devotion.
Chapter 7. Confrontation in the City.
At the peak of a blistering summer, Gatsby ceased his parties. With Daisy now visiting him more openly, he no longer needed them, but tensions spiked. Tom, suspecting his wife's attachment, became suspicious of Gatsby. One afternoon, I was at the Buchanan's estate with Jordan, Gatsby, Tom, and Daisy. The oppressive heat thickened every conversation. Daisy, seeking relief, or perhaps diversion, suggested a trip into the city. We piled into cars and headed to Manhattan, eventually taking a suite at the Plaza Hotel. There, the tension that had been simmering finally exploded. Tom challenged Gatsby on his past, mocking his supposed Oxford education and accusing him of illegal dealings. Gatsby demanded that Daisy tell Tom she never loved him. Desperate to comply, yet overwhelmed by conflicting memories, Daisy hesitated. She admitted she loved both men at different times, a revelation that cut Gatsby deeply. The day ended in tragedy on the drive back. Daisy, distraught and behind the wheel of Gatsby's yellow car, sped through the Valley of Ashes. Myrtle Wilson, Tom's mistress, ran into the road, apparently thinking it was Tom's car and eager to flag him down. In her panic, Daisy struck Myrtle and fled, leaving Myrtle dead on the ground. Gatsby took responsibility, determined to protect Daisy at all costs. Shocked and furious, Tom manipulated George Wilson, Myrtle's grieving husband, into believing Gatsby was to blame, fanning George's rage and heartbreak.
Chapter 8. Death by the Pool.
That night, I found Gatsby standing vigil outside Daisy's home, convinced she might need him. He refused to budge, even though Tom was with her inside. At dawn, I went to Gatsby's mansion, where he confided the entire story of his youth. His impoverished roots, his feverish desire to become a self-made success, and his first enchanted meeting with Daisy in Louisville. To him, Daisy had represented not just a woman, but a vision of radiant possibility, a world of glittering grace and comfort. He had been determined to become worthy of her. Despite my urging, Gatsby wouldn't leave Long Island or distance himself from the catastrophe. He clung to hope that Daisy would call or somehow choose him after all. Meanwhile, George Wilson, half crazed by grief, had pieced together information that pointed to Gatsby's yellow car. Haunted by the sight of the billboard's giant eyes and inflamed by a need for vengeance, George tracked Gatsby down to the mansion. Gatsby went for a swim in his pool that afternoon, an attempt to find solace in the lingering warmth of summer. George found him there, shot him, and then turned the gun on himself. Thus ended Gatsby's grand life with a sudden and brutal finality. The man who had stood on the shore each night, stretching his arms toward a distant light, lay motionless in the water, his dream shattered by a bullet.
Chapter 9. Aftermath and Reflection.
Reeling from the event, I became the one to arrange Gatsby's funeral. In the end, very few people came. Daisy vanished, presumably off with Tom, leaving no address. Gatsby's house, once ablaze with parties, fell eerily silent. None of the partygoers appeared to pay final respects. Even Meyer Wolfsheim, Gatsby's associate, expressed regret, but claimed he couldn't get involved. Only Gatsby's father, Henry Gatz, arrived, grieving yet filled with a quiet pride. He showed me an old schedule from Gatsby's boyhood, a vision of meticulous self-improvement and big dreams. In that worn notebook lay the seeds of Gatsby's extraordinary aspirations, as well as the naive romanticism that underpinned them. Disillusioned by the carelessness of the Buchanans and the shallowness of everyone else who had used Gatsby's hospitality, I decided to return to the Midwest. On my last night in West Egg, I walked across the empty lawn once thronged with revelers. I thought of Gatsby's faith in the green light, his unwavering hope that if he fought hard enough, he could rewrite the past and secure the future he had dreamed of. Fitzgerald leaves us with the image of boats moving against the current, forever borne back into the past, a reminder that we often chase our dreams, only to see them slip just beyond our grasp. In the end, Jay Gatsby's boundless longing and the tragic cost of that dream lingered with me. I had witnessed how illusions, no matter how grand, can be undone by the reality of time, class divisions, and human frailties. Even so, something about his hope, his dedication to an ideal, remained beautiful and haunting, a testament to the capacity of the human heart to reach for something just out of reach, beckoning across the water.
Abridged conclusion. In The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald captures both the shimmering promise and the merciless fragility of the American dream. Through the eyes of Nick Carraway, we see how Gatsby's devotion to Daisy, symbolized by the green light at the end of her dock, becomes an almost mythic quest for lost time and impossible love. Despite Gatsby's wealth, charm, and single-minded focus, he is undone by the cruel reality that some dreams cannot be molded to fit the present. And yet, his hopeful spirit endures in our memory, forever reminding us of the delicate line between aspiration and illusion.